So yeah, hello and welcome. If you've been a fan of this channel for some time, or at least watched a few of our previously uploaded videos, you'll agree that this type of video is a bit of a curveball to say the least. No long comical movie reviews or experimental comedy sketches today, although they will be hopefully back in action soon. Instead, I'm going to take a look back at one of my favourite video game franchises of all time, Prince of Persia. Mainly due to the fact that every sod is hunkered down in their house cause of the coronavirus pandemic just now, and this seems like a semi-serviceable way to pass the time. So here we go. Just to clarify, I'll mainly only be looking at the Sands of Time trilogy, as those are the 3 games that I grew up playing and still enjoy thoroughly to this day. I'll be brief and say that I've never played any of the pop games prior to this trilogy, well except for the original game, which was included as an Easter egg in the Sands of Time. I don't even think I get past the first level on that. From what I've heard though, the first 2 games are pretty decent, with the second in particular having a solid cult following, and Prince of Persia 3D being a glitchy crock of shit. Moving much further forward, I have briefly played the 2008 Prince of Persia soft reboot and found it entertaining enough, but it strayed pretty far from what I'd come to love, so it wasn't really my cup of tea. Forgotten Sands, however, I have completed a couple of times and had fun with, but it was a bit of a damp squib of a game. It had some great new platforming implementations, such as being able to freeze water for a certain length of time, and bringing back certain sections of the environment from the past which no longer exist in the present. That was cool, but aside from that, it was a total rehash of the Sands of Time in every way, with the story, combat and boss battles taking a huge step back from where they were at the end of the original trilogy. Anyway, without further ado, let's get fired into this review and blabber on about what was the first Prince of Persia game for many, including myself, 2003's The Sands of Time. The story of the Sands of Time follows our nameless Prince of Persia himself as his father's army are passing through India on the way to visit the Sultan of Azad, when one hell of an evil looking vizier entices them to attack the Maharaja's palace and loot many mythical artefacts within the treasure vaults to bring to the Sultan as gifts. Seriously though, why would the prince and his father trust this slimy traitor? Look at him! Anyway, the prince is eager to be the one to find the promised treasure and soon comes across the Dagger of Time, which he almost immediately realises has the power to rewind time itself and could come in handy. Which is putting it lightly. The prince's father, King Shahraman, has also came to find the Hourglass of Time and decides to take that and the Maharaja's daughter, Farah, as gifts for our plump little sultan. This angers the hell out of the vizier as he wants to use the sand to gain eternal youth or some such thing. Basically he's an evil old bastard at death's door and refusing to enter. So upon visiting Azad, the vizier tricks the prince into releasing the sands with his newly acquired dagger, no questions asked, and in doing so turns every poor sod within a 20-mile radius into sand monsters, except from himself as he's protected by the dagger, Farah who's protected by the amulet of time, and the vizier who, well, he's protected by some voodoo hoodoo staff of some kind that he's wailing about controlling the sands with. This is all really poorly explained in game, to be honest. It's then that Jafar, the vizier, has one last piss poor attempt to seize the dagger from the prince, who manages to escape his bony grasp and teams up with Farah to navigate through the palace of Azad and attempt to undo what he has done. For a 17-year-old game, the story is solid, but it's only really meant as an enticing setup, and then after that you're left to find your way up to the Tower of Dawn, where the vizier has had the hourglass taken. With no more story cutscenes appearing during the middle section of the game, we just get some plot advancements in the form of the prince daftly setting off Azad's defence system, killing his sand-riddled father, and slowly falling in love with the Maharaja's daughter, who were at odds at the beginning of the game. Now this may sound like a lot when it's said like that, but due to the fact that it spreads so thin throughout 3 hours of gameplay, that doesn't seem like all that much is happening for a huge section of the game. That isn't a bad thing though, as the journey itself through the treacherous, trap-ridden environments is honestly where the most fun comes from. Eventually the prince and Farah reach the hourglass, but old Princey is still unsure after several hours of bonding whether to trust Farah's words, as she has been the one desperate for him to undo his deed. So he hesitates, just for a brief moment, but it gives our old pal the Vizier the chance to appear out of thin air and ambush them, sending them down about 20 stories to a pitch black tomb where they start revealing their feelings for each other as the player starts to question whether or not their game disc is broken. I'm guessing this kind of weird black cutscene was implemented to save on budget, and it does work effectively on focusing the player to listen to the conversation rather than observe what's going on, because hee-haws going on. So after a dreamy bathhouse sequence, the prince wakes up from his slumber to find Farah has disappeared with the dagger, intending to end this herself. Luckily for us, she's left her amulet behind so we don't get transformed into the sand. The prince manages to catch up with Farah at the top of the Tower of Dawn, but he's unable to save her from falling to her death as she has used up all the rewinds in the dagger. I mean, he does try his best to save her and ends up with his hands cut to ribbons before scornfully plunging the dagger of time into the hourglass and creating a grand rewind, bringing things back to the way they sat before the attack in the Maharaja's palace. Which I've never understood, because the prince never had the dagger then. Surely it would rewind to the moment where he found it in the treasure vaults. But hey, time stories are a whole lot of what if, ands and buts, so I'll go with that. Our story ends with the prince running up to Farah's room to warn her of the evil vizier, only to end up killing the daft old bastard in a piss poor end fight and returning the dagger back to Farah. It's revealed that the first person narrative we as the player have been hearing was the prince retelling the story to Farah, which is a neat touch and makes sense. Probably best that he didn't tell her about all his inner monologues though, as he comes off as a snivelling arse when he starts up all that shit.
I'll meet you at the baths. She orders me around as if I were a servant. It's my own fault. With women, you need to show them you're in charge right from the start, or they'll walk all over you. Oh, have you been waiting here all this time? I didn't realize you meant these baths. I went to the other baths, clear across the other side of the city.
She thinks that his story's a load of cock and bull, a fairy tale, but is left in two minds after a sly prince divulges the secret word she told him and only ever him that one time in the tomb.
Just call me Kakolukia.
And they all lived happily ever after, until some dev come up with the concept of the Dahaka enemy. As mentioned, the story itself is more of a setup and resolution to tie up the game nicely, and it's only briefly integrated within the mid-section levels, instead letting the two main characters have time to bond and mature through clever gameplay mechanics, where they both rely on each other in order to work their way through Azad, and well, it works just perfect for a game like this. It gives ultimate freedom for the prince and Farah to be in this long, epic feeling journey together. The pacing of the plot is honestly perfect, and that it's not at all intrusive in the game once it truly gets going, but it never falls too far into the background to halt any feeling of forward momentum. For a game that was released nearly 20 years ago, The Sands of Time looks excellent on all platforms it was originally released on. The footage you're seeing on screen is from the PC version and so looks especially great, but even when I played my pretty bloody PS2 version the other day, I was still impressed by the limited 480p visuals on offer. I will add that although the remastered version of the trilogy on PS3 has noticeably improved texture detail, aside from that, it looks pretty awful by the way, all three of them do, so pick that up at your own peril. The game is set in a slightly mythical version of Persia, and the visual style is a healthy mix of Arabian fantasy and darker, more brooding environments, which gives us a chance to venture through a wide range of varying vistas that all look pleasing to the eye. The environments themselves are spectacular looking, and I'll go into more detail on them later in the video, but there's also more subtle details spread throughout the game which are impressive even to this day. Dirt and sand build up in the prince's white parachute pants as he dives around the palace, and when the player decides to stand still for an extended length of time, the prince will slowly begin to wipe his trousers and clean the dirt off. Nice. Another detail is that after the sands of time are unleashed, there are vibrant particles of sand swirling around on the ground, which give each environment a more dreamlike atmosphere, while also hammering home the emptiness of the world, as all the inhabitants have been consumed by the sands at this point. Other minor details include the prince leaving footprints on the ground after wading around in water. Also he slips when trying to run up a wall after being in water as well, which is cool. There are also incredible ambient sound effects that loop over specific sections of the game. For instance, in the defence chamber there's an otherworldly hum. In the Sultan's Zoo there's what sounds like creepy animal wails in the distance. and in the caverns underground the palace there's eerie dripping and the sounds of bats screeching all around you. The ambient audio loops really help sell each distinct environment just as well as the absorbing graphics. Music isn't exactly sparse throughout the game, but there are large segments where all we hear are the prince's movements and occasional grunts as he navigates the terrain. We're given silence when necessary to focus on tricky segments of platforming or try to figure out a puzzle, but when it comes to entering a room full of those bastard and sand monsters, the music blares. When combat begins there will always be an accompanying track, usually mixing elements of eastern percussion and vocals with more rock steady guitar riffs, and it all gels together perfectly. The music gives each fight a sense of weight and purpose, especially since each track only plays at specific points in the game, so it gives a quick sense of progression when a different combat song kicks in as you enter a new fight. You know you're moving on. It also helps to play a match each song with a specific region in the game without even really having to think on it. For instance, I know this is from the first couple of levels in Azad around the bed chambers. This is from the royal bathhouse. This is from the prison, and so on. The various music cues help each area you pass through feel different and even more memorable while never once sounding out of place within a Persian fantasy story. Probably the most important visual element of a 3D platformer are the in-game animations, and with this game, man did they nail that. Everything the prince does looks so smooth and effortless. The animations and interactions are obviously limited due to the age of the game, but you can run, jump, somersault, grapple, swing onto poles, combat enemies, and string together a wide array of acrobatic performance stunts which still look and feel so fluid to this day. It's crystal clear that the first thing the developers figured out was all the crazy moves the prince could pull off and work the environments around these skills carefully. The game's acrobatic party piece, so to speak, is the fact that the prince can run up and along walls to reach floors and podiums that would be impossible for many other video game characters. Even when he's locked in combat with a whole host of respawning enemies, all the acrobatic animations look incredible as he leaps around the place. The intricate animation of the sand creatures being absorbed into the prince's dagger may actually be my favourite visual of the game. It's really still a joy to behold and has stood the test of time without a doubt. The only negatives I have about the presentation is that even though the in-game dialogue is pretty much flawless in terms of writing and performance quality, sometimes the technical side of it holds it back somewhat. Volume levels can jump around sporadically to the point where it's actually a struggle to hear what someone's saying.
I could marry her. After all, she is a Maharaja's daughter. A conquered one, but still. Her blood is royal.
But aside from that, the pre-rendered CGI cutscenes look pretty stiff and janky now. Character models and movements appear quite jarring in them. That's about all. Also their volume levels can be comically low at times. You have to put the TV volume right up for that.
My friend, your visit brings joy and honour to my poor and humble dwelling.
But that's about it. The game still looks and sounds as enchanting as ever, with even the usually bland kind of main menu and pause menu tying in subtly to the time travel narrative of the game. The in-game HUD is perfect in its design too. It's kept so simple as it's just your life bar and sand tanks you need to keep track of, and when you're deep into a platforming section they will disappear, so it never really feels visually intrusive at all. It's all good. Sands of Time is a third-person action-adventure platformer in which the gameplay is wrapped up in 3 neat packages that all effortlessly intertwine throughout the duration of the game. These are combat, action platforming and puzzle solving, and it's probably best to go through them one by one to see how they each stand in their own merits. The combat on offer is where the game usually catches the most flack, and that's understandable as the fighting abilities of the prince in this title are somewhat limited, and with the enemies coming in mass hordes thick and fast, it can get a little tiresome to keep executing the same couple of moves over and over. Technically speaking, there are a fair amount of movesets available, but no noticeable combos yet to speak of. Each fight mostly consists of hacking and blocking multiple enemies with your sword, and finishing each monster off by absorbing their sandy existence into the Dagger of Time. The fast paced kicking, flipping and somersaulting all looks great on screen, but you'll figure out quite quickly that most moves you'll never need to do, and the best way to take down enemies is either to vault them or rebound from a nearby wall, downing them and leaving them open to your final dagger attack. To say it's a little shallow may be an understatement, but it's still mostly enjoyable, mainly due to the variety of enemies that you encounter and powerful time manipulating moves that you can perform with the dagger, like freezing monsters one by one or performing a massive multi-freeze. The monsters you face start off easy, as it's just servants of the palace really, but you soon come across far more demanding adversaries. There are large blue sand guards, chain wielding guards, huge hulking blacksmiths, meat hook warriors, and toughest of all, sand generals. Those big bastards are a pain in the arse. As the game wears on, you do start to fight larger and larger packs of creatures, and even though the combat is never too challenging, the fights in the courtyard and the elevator near the end can be strenuous to say the least, but this is in large part thanks to Farah, who tries her best to fight beside you but comes off more as a damsel in distress as her life bar depletes in front of your very eyes. That can be annoying. Most of the fun here comes from figuring out each monster's weakness and subsequently trying to exploit it in the next fight. Aside from the decent amount of transformed human foes, there are also sand bats, birds and scarabs that you come up against from time to time, but I would have to say these encounters may be the weakest and most annoying part of the game. The scarabs in truth get a pass, as you can easily chop away at them and even dodge past them at certain points, but the bats and birds are absolute shite. The bats all approach you at once when you're high up or walking in a tight ledge, and you need to swipe away at them until there's only 3 or less remaining. Sounds easy enough, but it's damn near impossible to take them out without getting bitten to fuck. The vultures, or whatever they are, show up sporadically as well, and mainly just consist of you blocking until they attack, then striking them down, but getting timing right can be a bit of a chore. It's alright when you're on ground level, but there's this one section smack bang in the middle of the game where they attack you one by one while you try to balance on a beam. Yeah, that part's woeful. One last thing worth noting about the enemies in this game, well, the human ones anyway, is that they can also use the power of the sand, though not to the same extent you can, but they can teleport during battles, which gives off a sound effect that would burst your eardrums, as well as use the sand to resurrect themselves if you aren't quick enough to finish them off. It's a neat couple of additions that add to the fights, and the design of the enemies are certainly more striking and intimidating than most that appear in the next 2 games, but the combat system overall does leave a lot to be desired. It's just that the flaws are even somewhat magnified because most levels are overflowing with fight sequences. Onto the platforming now, and this is where the game really comes into its element. The Prince controls brilliantly, even to this day. You feel like you have complete control of his abilities, and all the moves he can pull off seem logical within the context of the game world. He can jump from wall to wall, run walls, balance in narrow ledges, push crates, swing from ropes and horizontal bars, and climb ladders at a sensational speed. The greatest single element of the gameplay is undoubtedly the time manipulation powers that you gain from the Dagger of Time. The main hook being that the Prince can rewind time back to a maximum of 10 seconds or so if you make a mistake, or even fall to your death. Not exactly sure how he can click the dagger when he's dead, but it works. In fact, it more than works, it's an ingenious way to dismiss the need for checkpoints, as you will very rarely need them now thanks to the fact that you can undo your mistakes in a few seconds. It's masterfully implemented and somehow never comes across as cheap or cheating. Since most of the platforming is trial and error, it feels only natural to rewind back after making a mistake because you've now figured out the way it must be done after making an arse of it in attempt number 1. You can also temporarily slow down time, but honestly I never used this at all in my last playthrough. The power becomes essential in future titles, but here it just seems kinda like a pointless addition. The controls for the most part are fully responsive. There's just a couple of times where you can't quite see the sweet spot to jump to because of the glitchy camera, so the rewind button is literally a lifesaver on those occasions. The dagger is fueled by the sands of time and contains sand tanks which can be filled by either finding sand clouds hidden all around the levels, 48 of them, or as mentioned earlier, killing off enemies and taking their sand. Sand is plentiful in the game, so it's highly unlikely that you'll ever run out, but it's balanced out just perfectly so that you can't just keep spamming the rewind button to your heart's content, because then you will eventually run dry. The death-defying acrobatics themselves are my favourite element in the game and add up to some of the greatest platforming mechanics in gaming history. The outlandish moves just flow together so effortlessly, and the prince feels weighty and responsive when he's using his momentum to swing from a pole 200 feet in the air even. For most of the game you'll enter a room at one side and have to get to the other by meticulously carving out a path with the help of Farah, who can fit through small cracks in the wall and assist by standing on pressure plates and such. To be fair though, we do nearly everything and she's essentially just there for company, and so the character development can grow. Movements are precise and specific as you run past saw blades, dodge whirling sabres and jump to avoid giant wall pincers. Like, I don't know what the hell the Sultan of Azad was thinking about having these traps. I mean, why the hell would he install saw blades and pincers into his library, for Christ's sake? Anyway, it's clear that the game was a pioneer in the action platforming genre, feeling like the precursor to games like Assassin's Creed and Uncharted, yet not feeling the least bit outdated when compared to them. It's fair to say that this is unquestionably the easiest game in the trilogy, mainly thanks to the fact that each time you enter a complex room requiring a bundle of platforming to get through, the camera will go into full Hollywood blockbuster mode and scan around the place, displaying exactly where you should be going. That's not a bad addition in the slightest, in fact I really do like that, but when it's coupled with the fact that your save points, in the form of swirling sand clusters, show you intricate visions of the future when you walk into them, it does become slightly overkill. It was only my most recent playthrough that I watched each and every vision, and it did surprise me just how much the game holds your hand through many of the quote-unquote trickier platforming segments of the game. Don't get me wrong, it's a neat artistic touch, but I'm pretty glad that the future games get rid of the hand-holding stuff. The game can be challenging at times, but there's no steep difficulty curve or anything like that. There are even clear attempts to even out the difficulty towards the end of the journey, as you eventually get an immensely powerful sword that can wipe out enemies with one strike, but you no longer have the dagger to rewind your mistakes, so ultimately combat becomes far easier, but you need to take much more care with your platforming. It works well. Last but not least, we come on to the puzzles, or should I say puzzle solving elements weaved into the platforming, as there's only really two main puzzles in the game. The first one is where we meet what seems to be the sole survivor of this sandy apocalypse, some guard with the fakest Cockney accent you've ever heard in your puff.
Oh, thank God! I was afraid you were one of them! Can you help me activate the Azad defense system?
He resets a bunch of axles for us so we can match them up with the correct symbol and crank them back up again. It's a time consuming but ultimately easy puzzle, as there's even a helpful diagram on the wall showing the route to each axle, so it's damn near impossible to get stuck here. That said though, I do find this one a bit of a slog. It's almost immediately recovered though by the guard's laughably camp yells as he's consumed by the sand. Legend. The second puzzle was like, 4 hours later, and just includes lining up a bunch of mirrors in the correct position to beam light onto a symbol. Again, it's easy stuff, as we've dealt with mirrors and light beams earlier in the game. As stated earlier, there are loads more understated puzzles peppered throughout most levels, where we may need to stand in pressure plates or pull levers to move platforms. They're all serviceable and a welcome addition, as they do get your brain thinking away briefly, but I wouldn't say they're the focal point of the gameplay, and they actually become sparser as the trilogy goes on, with usually one major puzzle per installment. For around 95% or so of the adventure, the Prince and Farah are making their way in and around the Palace of Azad, so it would be forgivable if much of the surroundings starting to become visually monotonous as you plod along, but incredibly, this is far from the case actually. Sure, some levels may be similar in architecture, like the two sets of bathhouses and underground caverns, but each individual area has an atmosphere and art style all its own. Unlike other games in the series where many environments all seem to blend into one another and it's kinda easy to forget what comes next as you play through the story again, in Sands of Time it's genuinely easy to recall the chronology of the game as every single setting stands out. Some outdoor areas are wide open and simple to parkour around as are chiefly implemented to give a good flow to the platforming, but for every expansive environment that gives you room to breathe, there's a colossal enclosed puzzle of a place that's going to take some clever thinking on the player's part in order to get from A to B. As I said, there's swooping cinematic camera angles and pre-rendered visions available to help guide you through potentially complex sections, but even with their help, some of the more elaborate levels prove a worthy challenge in early playthroughs. But once you beat the game a good few times, it becomes less about figuring out what you have to do and more about remembering what you did last time you were here. There's always a perfectly arranged ledge or pole hiding in plain sight for you. It finds just the right balance, and even though the prince only learns a few new moves as we advance, no two levels ever look or play the same. My personal favourite levels in the game have to be the royal baths, the prison and the library. These three in particular are burned into my memory and the first visuals I get in my head when someone mentions the game. Each of these environments have their own exclusive atmosphere that bring them to life. The baths look cosy and luxurious, except for the fact they're crawling with silent creatures. The library is a towering room of enchantment filled with mirrors and bookcases, while the prison feels so gritty and blood-soaked. Hell, there's even a river of blood running underneath you as you enter a specific hallway. Easily the biggest switch of scenery from the usual colourful, charming surroundings, and a brief look in the direction the series would sharply head in. Aside from the atmosphere, these areas are wonderfully complex in design, having you string together loads of puzzle elements and polished platforming action continuously, thanks to some first-rate level design. These rooms and many more have you scaling multiple levels and then doubling back on yourself once you've somehow managed to reach a segment that was inaccessible before. It feels so satisfying when you can tilt the camera up or down and see just how far you've come. This is perhaps especially true in fact for your final ascent on the Tower of Dawn. Not all the levels are this great to play through of course though. Again, this mainly comes down to personal preference, but there are a few levels that I find uninspiring and that I can't wait to breeze past. There's a warehouse level early in the game that I've never been a fan of. It just consists of you and Farah sequentially pulling levers, moving platforms, so you can descend down to the ground floor for an almighty showdown. I mean, don't get me wrong, the warehouse does have a cool eerie feel to it, largely thanks to the ambient background sounds. But the level comes across a bit too empty for its own good, and it doesn't actually help that the Sultan Zoo comes after it, because that's a level that I'm always up for returning to. My least favourite level in the game however is that high wire act with the sandbirds that I mentioned earlier. Honestly, come to think of it, the beam walking is the only aspect of platforming that I find irritating. It doesn't help when it's introduced to us in a level where we're trying to learn the ropes while constantly fighting off those winged bastards. You move at a snail's pace with your sword drawn. It's pretty much the only section of the game I would happily get rid of. Overall though, the derelict centre of Azad proves an entirely satisfying location for the Prince's first adventure. There are some areas that feel largely welcoming and others that make you just stop for a second and realise the crushing sense of isolation all around you due to the Prince acting like a loony and releasing the sands. The mystique of the palace is also enhanced by the 10 secret fountains you can find concealed within its walls. These strange ethereal sanctums act purely as health upgrades, but they're a welcomed inclusion as they're spread around most levels and keep you alert to your surroundings at all time. Any wall that looks the least bit decayed immediately deserves a swipe. Okay, so just before I get into the final verdict, it's probably wise that I talk very briefly about the boss battles in Sands of Time. There's two of them, and they're fucking rank rotten. Okay, maybe I'm being a bit harsh as they aren't game breaking or anything, they're just painfully easy and don't stand out at all, as there's zero platforming involved in either. The first boss is with your father of all people, in that same reception hall we had the battle like half an hour ago. It's pish. All you have to do is vault over him a dozen or so times and slash away until his 9-foot arse hits the deck like a sack of spuds. I mean, the fight itself's pretty bad, but there's also not much emotional weight to the battle either. A cutscene plays and then he's all but forgotten about until the two thrones, I think. And then we have the final boss. Isn't even worth going into detail on this one really. It's a sorry excuse for a challenge as we take on what appear to be constructed clones of the Vizier in Farah's bedchamber before smacking the real decrepit old git right through our doorway. And since he's at death's door already, we essentially show him mercy by putting him out of his misery. I do approve of the ending taking place in an all new environment, but the battle itself is god awful. I don't think anyone who adores the game has a leg to stand on when it comes to defending the boss fights. They're far from its strong suit. Even though I may have ended the review on a somewhat sour note, the truth of the matter is, I love the hell out of this game. It does have a few rough edges, and the combat could well have done with some fleshing out to stop it becoming so repetitive. But aside from that, the game's damn near a masterpiece, and one of the most consistently enjoyable experiences to play through. The story's captivating, the world's charming, and the gameplay mechanics hold up just about as well as possible, considering this was 2003 after all. Thanks to its charming atmosphere and wholly satisfying environments, The Sands of Time is easily one of my favourite action-adventure games of all time. It was a masterful achievement back in the day, and is still a must-play game just now. That is, if you just so happen to have a system to play it on. The game wraps everything up nicely and works fine and dandy as a standalone experience, but there's two more games to cover in the series, and only time will tell whether the next instalment retains a light-hearted charm that made the sands of time so appealing.
You bitch!
Join me next time for Warrior Within's review. Thanks very much for watching, especially if you sat through this whole entire video. I appreciate it very much. Please like and share the video if you enjoyed what you've seen, and subscribe to the channel for more content coming up. Thanks a lot.